want to tell the story of African Americans here in the Mississippi Delta.
How much of this story of Mount Bayou is actually represented in the museum?
When Jesus and the apostles and disciples were getting ready to feed 5,000 people, and they only had bread. They had a loaf of bread or 2 loaves of bread, and they had a couple of fish. But they took that and they blessed it, and that right there fed the 5,000. And so what do we have in our hands? We have our story. We have this tremendous story, and we bring it to God and say, this is our story, you bless it.
In your museum or in your city or within your network, what do you hear people say about this possibility of us able to solve this problem of working together and finding a common solution among ourselves? Like whether we are talking of Mount Bayou or New York or in other parts of the West. We have started again in this important episode. Welcome to Obehi Podcast, where we talk about our story, talk about our experiences. If this is your first time here, I encourage you to make sure you subscribe to this channel and click the like button. Make sure you click on the bell so that every time we publish a new video, you will listen to it. Because you understand that in Obehi Podcast, we talk a lot about our history, our experiences as people of African descent. But of course, also other people. We are not trying to neglect the story of other people, but we are intentional here in that we are trying to elevate our story, our experiences as a people, both in the diaspora and also those at home. So today I have the honor of talking to a gentleman who is joining us from the United States, who have a good experience. His story is really, really rich. So he's going to be explaining to us today his perspective from his vantage point. So this is where we're going to be starting from. We do it like they usually would say, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you say about that?
All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Hermon Johnson Jr. And I'm born and raised here in Mount Bayou, Mississippi. If you're not familiar with that town, look it up. My brother and I started a museum in 2021. And that museum is called the Mount Bayou Museum. The website is mountbayumuseum.org. Our story is very rich here. Like I said, I was born and raised here, but I'm a musician, and in 1977, I was a part of a band that was from here, and the band ended up going to Los Angeles. And I decided to stay in LA for a couple of years, figuring I'd come back to Mount Bayou. But I ended up getting married and having a child. And because the area that we were living in Los Angeles was not the best, I could see my child growing up, ending up in the streets like most people do in that area. So I decided to get married, stay, and have more children. This is where will be my wife. And I got married. We had end up with 5 children. I raised all my children there in Los Angeles area. Actually, we moved out a little bit into a better area, and I raised my kids there. So still, the urge was still to come back to Mount Bayou. Now, I had wanted years ago to become political, maybe run for some office and to help in this area. But my wife did not want to move. So I started working with my brother, who had become mayor here for a little while. My father was vice mayor here in Mount Bayou for over 30 years. And so I understood the political, area, the landscape here politically in a little bit, but you're in Mississippi, and all these politics here are either black and white. Now, Mount Bayou happens to be one of the oldest all black founded towns in the country. And so we had a little political advantage here in this city and in the county because we had a high number of Black people here in this area. So running for statewide political office was pretty much a lot easier here because you had a lot of people of Black African American descent who would tend to vote for you rather than vote for the old guard of the white establishment. And so, but it never worked out for me to get here to run for office. My brother did in the town. And so he began to tell me a lot more about Mount Bayou than I had initially known. All of us who live here know a little bit about the story. We're all taught that in school. They allude to that in elementary school. We allude to it in high school. And there's programs and things that happen all the time here, so you know it's a special place. But the details of the history, I didn't know. And while in LA, my brother started sending me things, and I decided, I really need to get back there. But we worked on some projects here, there, while I was there for maybe 12, 13 years, trying to get something initiated here. And so we ended up talking to a lot of people. I talked to some people about helping with a museum, and several people who had collections were offering to put their collection if we had a building in Mount Bayou. So when the school closed in 2018, I didn't know that was presenting us a chance. But in 2019 or 2020 or 2019, I asked my brother to go check to see if there's one of those buildings on the campus could be utilized. And so we were able to get one of the buildings on campus. And so there we go. Then the next year was the pandemic, which gave me actually an exit to leave Los Angeles. And so I came here, and in 2021, we opened this museum here in Mount Bayou. And the people who one of the gentlemen who offered his collection, he had been offered $3 million for the collection, but he turned it down so he could bring it to this museum. And so we have the Alvin Simpson collection here. But right off, we were offered another collection from a movie, The Women of the Movement, which is about the women Emmett Till story. After that was done, after it was finished shooting it, we were offered that collection. And so we brought that collection in. And then that next year, we start collaborating with the Till people who had the Till movie. And long story short, we ended up with them, MGM, which is their distributor. They ended up building an exhibit for us here at this museum. And so we have quite an extensive collection here. We get a lot of high marks for our museum, but we want to tell the story of African Americans here in the Mississippi Delta, which is kind of like the crux of what everything was about in slavery. When slavery was happening here in the United States, it was all about cotton for the most part. And this place where the richest soil in the country is right here in the Mississippi Delta. And so this became a hotbed of that whole effort. And also right here in the Mississippi Delta, because it was such a high number of African Americans here, and in most places around the area, there were a lot of cotton plantations. So this became the place where the blues was founded. We came out of the Mississippi Delta, and a lot of blues musicians came out of the Mississippi Delta. And blues, the genre, the blues became, it didn't become, but it formed the basis of America's rock music. and it kind of formed the basis of America's R&B music. And then that kind of formed the basis of today's hip hop music. So a lot of things came out of the Delta, but you know, a lot of richness. But here to this date, we don't economically benefit from it nearly like we should. And so I think here in Mount Bayou, there are ways that we can reverse that trend. We can reverse it here because we're all Black. And I think if we can get people's imagination to imagine that we can do here and capture our essence here in Mount Bayou, then we're on to changing the imaginations of our children. And we're on to changing the imaginations of even America, the rest of America, to not oppose a lot of things that we do here. And I think we're on a better track once we understand our value to ourselves. And so I think here in Mississippi and in the Delta, which they would, you know, if you would ask 1,000 or 10,000 African Americans about where they want to see something like this happen, I would bet you 95% would not even think about the Mississippi Delta. But the Mississippi Delta is the most fertile place for it.
Let's take a moment to go back again, and then we'll come back to this part. Now, this is really very interesting. This is an interesting conversation. Now, you were born in Mount Bayou. That is where you grew up, correct?
Right.
All
Correct.
right. I want you to take us back to how it was for you when you were much younger. Give us a picture to see the Mount Bayou of your time as a young adolescent.
Well, you know, when we enter into this world, we see what we see. You know, we don't know unless someone tells us that there's something different about the way you're growing up. We don't know that. We just live. I have, you know, when I was growing up here, you know, everything was, you know, all of my teachers, for the most part, were Black, and all of my, you know, my uncle at the time was the postmaster. I had an uncle who was he was the principal of the high school. You know, we owned a cotton. My family, my grandfather had owned a cotton gin, and then when he passed away in the early '60s, my uncles began to run it. And so when a lot of people around here were picking cotton, you know, we were at the cotton gin. You know, they put it into bales, you know, that type of thing. We were ginning the cotton. But the business people here were all Black, which is uncommon in America. But we didn't think anything of it as we were growing up until we would leave town and realize, you know, you get to an age where you realize that you're and so that's kind of what happened here. You know, we would go different places, and when people from Mount Bayou travel to other places, other people would say something, tell us different about us, and maybe we had hair that didn't grovel. I guess I'm not sure of the right word, but we just didn't. If we went to another place, for instance, I was telling somebody this just the other day. There was a dentist in a town next to us, about 2 miles away, but there was a lot of white people in that town, but we would go to that dentist, and in his dental office he had a white waiting room and a colored waiting room. Well, the white waiting room was much nicer with magazines and the whole thing. So when we walked in, we just walked into the white waiting room. You know, now most Black people would have walked in and gone, knowing they were supposed to go to the colored waiting room. We had no idea that we were supposed to go to a colored waiting room. We just went to the
what is color waiting room? What is that supposed to mean?
color. So I might be saying my words fast, but it's colored, like color red, color blue, color green, colored. The
Yeah, I
color.
understand.
So
I
instead
hear
of
that,
saying,
but I'm trying to understand what that means.
well, they wanted to, everything was separate, right? So in the United States, in some establishments in the U.S., Black people couldn't enter. You couldn't go in some places, even when I was growing up, in some places you couldn't go to the front door. You had to, Black people, when you wanted to grace that establishment for let's say, for instance, for a restaurant. If you want to go to this restaurant, there may be a sign in front of the restaurant say no Blacks allowed, or no colored allowed, no Negroes allowed, something like that, or whites only. There was some type of language there to separate us. So Black people may know in that area that they were not supposed to go through the front door. They were supposed to go through the side door or the back door to enter that establishment. And maybe you got service that way. That didn't happen here in Mount Bayou, but people outside of this area, and you were in Mississippi, you grew up knowing that was your place. That was how you navigated your space, your area, is that everything was black and white, and you always got the low end of the bad end of the stick there. So in Mount Bayou, that did not, we didn't grow up that way. And it may be kind of different or difficult to understand it if you did not grow up that way in this country. But everybody in this country, especially in the South, knew this is how you navigated your space. You lived that way.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that conversation. That is really important because now you are setting up the basis upon which the entire conversation is also based on. And you're talking about story, talking about how it was before, so that people that are seeing it today can also sort of understand where we are coming from, which is also the beauty of storytelling.
Yeah.
And you're organizing a museum too. You see, everything is connected here now. You see, we reach out to you from With Diaspora because we are building this international organization of African people that are in the diaspora, which is the African Diaspora. Try to look at our common challenges and also look at how do we represent ourselves? What kind of story do we want to tell? What is important for us? How do we celebrate our heritage? That is why we look up to you, we contacted you to learn about what are possible way of collaboration. But first now we are learning about your story, you are sharing with us. These are important for us. We need to learn about ourselves without somebody necessarily telling us, oh, I will invite you. You see, you were talking about this time now in US history where you are supposed to go through the back door. And now we are saying, no, we don't want to go through the back door. We want to set up the entire establishment and we choose where we want to stay. We will invite you if you want to. Come and join us. But you are joining us because we set the table also where we are part of. So this is important for us. Now, tell me something. You are organizing this museum and you are telling this story. What is the story you want people to take away from it?
Well, it's kind of what I started with. What I want us to see is that I want us to understand where we actually are now. Okay. And when I say that, I use this example all the time, and I don't know how effective it is. But I understand what I'm thinking when I'm saying it. So let me just say it again. Let me say it to you also. In America, there's approximately 40 million African Americans here in this country. But if you go to, and we're spread out all over the country, but if you go to any one of the cities, any one of the towns in America, and you are going and you're trading in that town, for the most part, and of course there are some exceptions, but for the most part, we don't own anything for the most part. So if you, like a lot of people here in the United States, they say Atlanta is the blackest town in the US because, you have a high percentage of black people, more than most towns, that are in Atlanta, and you have a lot of professional African Americans in Atlanta. But if they put on anything, if you put on a show, if you put on an event, a workshop or a seminar or a convention or a concert in Atlanta, and you look at the money that's being counted out your pocket and where it's going, 90% of your money is going to go to a white owner or white establishment. The Hilton Hotel is going to be owned by white people. The cars that you rent is going to be owned by a white establishment. And so if you multiply that across the country in all different aspects of business, we are still just consumers. And to me, we're still living on a plantation. Plantations is what we were living on, before the civil rights movement and before slavery. I mean, during slavery, we lived on plantations for the most part, black people, and we were working for the white owner of that plantation, and he was benefiting and we weren't. And so in order to reverse that, it's going to be a large undertaking. But I think here in Mount Bayou, well, we didn't grow up that way here in Mount Bayou. I put it that way. And in Mount Bayou, all the dollars that circulated here in Mount Bayou circulated between a black establishment 5 or 6, 7 times here in this community. And I think we need to multiply that here in this town in order for us to understand that that's where we're at. Black people are a lot of us are just satisfied to have a job, get a good job, which is also that plantation mentality, get a good job and work 30 or 40 years, retire and be satisfied. I think we should look for more. At least some of us should, and we should be the business instead of just the person who's looking for somebody to hire them. To me, we should try to navigate ourselves to a better position, in this country. And I think Mount Bayou offers an opportunity for us to at least think different. And, because we can Mount Bayou is really small right now. We're about 1,200, 1,300 people at this moment, but there's land all around us. There's thousands of acres of land around us. So we can build any community that we want. And then the infrastructure in this community, in that community, is all of us. Now, how much is that going to change everybody's pocketbook? It's going to change the few people that are here. But the most important thing, I think, is for it to change the imagination of the rest of the country, because the rest of the country will understand what's going on here in Mount Bayou. And the rest of us African Americans will understand what's going on here. And I think the imagination of us would change because of that.
Thank you so much for that.
Here.
Yeah. Now, that which you are saying sort of resonate with a larger part of the African diaspora community, not just in the United States. So have you done more than 1,000 interviews talking to different people of African descent? What you're saying is the same like what I've seen or heard in different places. In most of the cases, some person is coming to sell us something to buy, so that we are just the consumer, whether here in diaspora and of course also in Africa. So my curiosity therefore is there something responsible for this, in the sense that can we do something about it? I mean, can we change this situation? Because it's not favorable for us. We don't want to continue like this.
Right.
We also can offer something. We don't
Right.
want to just work and give the money to somebody who is coming to take care of us. Can't we
Right.
take care of ourselves? In the diaspora,
Absolutely.
we are more than 200 million people. Can't we solve the problem? Can't we look for a way? That is the question.
And that is what we're doing, looking for the way to solve that problem, uh, and working toward that way to solve that problem. And Mount Bayou is one of those ways, I believe. And if we can look at it that way, then we can start moving in that direction. This is just what I think, and I'm glad that you're saying that that is what you guys, and you've heard that before, and that is what you are looking for, because we want to position ourselves to be part of the solution to that issue. And I think for America, you know, for the United States, if you are from any other country, from the Gambia or Ghana, Nigeria, any of the African countries, or even any of the Caribbean countries, why don't, if we're trading with anyone in America, why don't we look first to see if there's a way to trade with an African American company, and or if there's a way, even if it costs you a little bit more, even if it costs you in time or even resources, just a little bit more, and you can evaluate it to the point where you can leave something extra behind for your children and your children's children, then why don't you look for a way to trade with a company out of a city like Mount Bayou? If somebody's bringing in products from any one of those countries and to be distributed in Mississippi, I mean, in the United States, then why can't you, instead of putting it in a Dallas or Chicago or places like that, why not put that warehouse or distribution company in Mississippi, in Mount Bayou, Mississippi? Now we have more jobs here, and we're building up our own. Mount Bayou represents, to me, us, our, you know, it represents. And let me go back and just say this little, to give you a little bit of understanding of why I'm so focused on Mount Bayou. Of course, one thing is I'm from here, but the most important thing is that the way Mount Bayou started is that the people that started Mount Bayou came from a plantation, like most people do, like I said before. But the plantation that the people started, or the people from Mount Bayou came from, was a plantation out of Vicksburg, Mississippi, south of Vicksburg, in the Vicksburg vicinity. And that plantation was owned by a man named Joseph Davis. And Joseph Davis was the elder brother of Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. So now that plantation symbolically means a lot. But I.T. Montgomery, who's our founder, his father, Benjamin Montgomery, ran those plantations while they were still enslaved. But after the Civil War, it became the best benefit for everybody involved for Joseph Davis to sell that plantation to Ben Montgomery. And that was one of the top plantations in the country. So right out of the civil, right after slavery, right out of the war, after the Civil War, Ben Montgomery and his son, I.T. Montgomery, become some of the wealthiest people in the United States right out of slavery. And they developed the highest grade of cotton in the world. And so, people pass on, and Ben Montgomery passed, and the elder Joseph Davis passed. But I.T. Montgomery continued this and started Mount Bayou, him and his cousin. And so they again get the highest grade of cotton in the world. And there's a lot of remarkable things that happen in the life of Mount Bayou. A lot of remarkable things. It ended up being a sanctuary city during the civil rights movement, and a lot of the civil rights organizing happened here in Mount Bayou. But my point is that that story from the plantation until now is a story where our heads would not ever bow down, not even in slavery. And then after slavery, through the beginning of Mount Bayou, there's a story all the way through of how the first Black manufacturing venture in the country was started here. And some of the more remarkable things, some of the things that you know about. Let me tell you something else. There is a story about how Coca-Cola, that everybody knows about, was founded through our people here in Mount Bayou. One of the larger bread companies in the country is Wonder Bread, probably the largest, but it was started here in Mount Bayou. Now, it shows the innovation. We had to, again, like I said, I think I mentioned several times that we had the highest grade of cotton in the world here, which means a lot because the United States got off its economic knees and became a world power through the cotton industry. Well, our people here overcame all of that and became the wealth and innovated that to the point where they had that highest grade of cotton. That means something symbolically. So my point is that historically, you can make a case for in many different reasons for where we are in the Mississippi Delta. That means something a lot, and what they did here in this town, that means a lot symbolically, and everything is positioned in the right way to make this place a success, a raging success, if we get behind it as African Americans and understand that. So if we can do trade, if we can do tourism from the countries and come here, though all of those factors strengthen this place, and it helps us as people here interact with our diaspora in much different ways, because we are controlling things in a lot more here. We end up having more control here in Mount Bayou than we would anywhere else in the country. And so I think that's very valuable for us to interact with the rest of the diaspora that's spread out around the world.
Thank you so much for that. That story again is important. When you touch story, you touch emotion of the people. Now, tell me something. We are touching about also tourism now. Then, of course, you are talking about people coming in curious of things. But you have the best spot, the museum, which is if people were to come to Mount Bayou now, they want to come to the museum because the museum is a representation of what have happened before. Whether
Right.
you are collecting it around there or people are bringing it from outside, you are certainly talking about the past. So tell me about how much of this story of Mount Bayou is actually represented in the museum.
Well, we try to tell all of it as much as possible. We talk about a lot about the plantation, because most people, when they tell you they know about the story of Mount Bayou, they really don't know the story about the plantation. And to me, that is the most critical part of the story, because Ben Montgomery on that plantation was actually trying to start another country. Their ideas were not just to start a little city where we can live in, but he was actually trying to start a country. And matter of fact, when his son I.T. Montgomery died in 1924, one of the things that he was known for at that time, one of the things that he was working on at that time, was to have the American president buy the country of Congo, because at that time the Belgians owned Congo, and he wanted him to buy the Congo so that African Americans here would have American soil over in back to Africa, and we could just go back to Africa, and just go back to the Congo, and it would be easier for us to do that. So there was always that yearning to do it, and Auntie Montgomery was trying to find a way to do that, at least have an option, living here in this country, have an option to go back if you wanted to, at some point. So I think a lot of those factors are very important. Now, here in the museum, we do tell the critical stories that America knows about. A lot of people in the U.S. are familiar with the Emmett Till story. And so the Emmett Till story typifies what was happening to African Americans in this country. And it brought a lot of attention to what was happening, the brutality and that was happening to African Americans in this country. The Emmett Till case typifies that. Well, Mound Bayou was all up in that case. Matter of fact, when the mother of Emmett Till came to Mississippi to attend the trial of the killers of her son, the only safe place for her to stay was in Mound Bayou. And the only people who were actually, when that case was going on, the only people who were actually doing real investigation were the people from Mound Bayou. T.R.M. Howard, who was was kind of a semi well-known civil rights activist at that time. And so they were actually doing real investigation, because the white sheriff over there in Tallahatchie County was just playing games. He wasn't really serious about finding out and punishing anybody that did anything wrong. So we tell that story. We tell the story of the plantation and all the remarkable things that happened from slavery up until now. We talk about that. But then also here in this museum, we talk about the future. We talk a lot about the future, and because I want people to see where we can go. Matter of fact, even today, we're going to put up an exhibit that shows some. There was a college, a university that did an architectural class, and their credit for that class was for them to design a museum to go beside one of our older buildings here in town, which is our old bank building. And they were to design it, what it would look like for a museum to be right next to that, attached to that building. I think there were like 17, or maybe more, 25 or so of those designs. And they're futuristic. They're designs that these kids did for credit, but they look nice. And I want to put them on the wall because I want people here who come and to this museum to see what the future could be. Because a lot of people around here they view Mound Bayou as just another little town in the Delta that has lost population, that has lost people because of the mechanization of agriculture, and because the state won't put any won't push any industries up in this area because it's mostly Black. So I want people to see what it could look like, because we are going to have to do this. We are the ones, Black people are the ones who are going to have to change our status here and our place here in this country. And we can do it through tourism. We can do a lot of that through tourism. We can at least get a lot of momentum going through tourism, because we were left with a beautiful story of resilience. We were left with a story, and that we can take and make that work for us, to change everything here in this area. And so we can't change the story, so let's utilize it. That's what's in our hand. In the Bible, there is a parable of where when Jesus was getting ready to, Jesus and the apostles and disciples were getting ready to feed 5,000 people, and they only had bread. They had a loaf of bread or 2 loaves of bread, and they had a couple of fish. But they took that and they blessed it, and that right there fed to 5,000. And so what do we have in our hands? We have our story. We have this a tremendous story, and we bring it to God and say, this is our story. You bless it. And so this is where we're going with what we got right here. This is where I see it. I'm just one person, but I have a voice now because I have a museum. And so now I'm going to let my voice be out here because I think people should listen and people should see at least some eyes are being opened now. And so we're getting a lot of good feedback here. We have a matter of fact, the reason I had to leave out of that other room in there is because that was the main room of the museum. And tomorrow we got about 60 people coming, and so the lady that works here needed to kick me out so she can fix that room up.
That's great, no? They need to prepare for the people.
Right. So,
All right.
so
now tell me something. This conversation that we are talking about, which is about finding a solution, because that is entirely what it's about, no? Finding a solution to our problem. If you look at We Diaspora website, you see that we project 3 conferences for next year, 2026. We're going to be talking about issues like African geopolitics, looking at issues like the Berlin Conference of the 1800, looking at issues like the collaboration between Africa and the rest of the world. Now, we are not just going there to talk for the sake of talking. We want to talk, but for the purpose of using that as an instrument to initiate collaboration, initiate a possibility of able to have a mutual understanding so we can work together. We are talking because we want something to come out of it. So where I'm really going with this is, in your museum or in your city or within your network, what do you hear people say about this possibility of us able to solve this problem of working together and finding a common solution among ourselves? Like whether we are talking of Mount Bayou or New York or in other parts of the West, where we have a huge concentration of African and African descent, we are looking for a way to solve our problem. And we start by talking about it. What do you hear people talk about?
Well, last year, last summer, there was a conference, a large conference. Matter of fact, there was one in Toronto, and then there was one in Atlanta. The one in Toronto, because there was a time factor where they were trying to organize a lot of people from Africa to come over to the United States in order to facilitate trade. And there was going to be this large conference there. What happened was, I think what happened because last year from Toronto, there was visa issues. People weren't getting their visas in time to come over to Canada. And so there were only a few people there. But in Atlanta, that problem was solved. And so there's an organization called, I might not have it right, but I can give it to you later. But I think it's something like National Council of Negro African. Well, it used to be called Regional Council of Negro Leadership, and I don't know what the name changed to. But like I said, I can give that to you later. But anyway, that organization had a conference in Atlanta, and there were over 2,000 people there, with the bulk of them being from the different countries in Africa. And you had a lot of ministers of trade, and you had a lot of people who were in very high positions in the different countries in Africa, and they were over there meeting with African Americans to establish relationships, to establish trading here in this country. And I think that was I was so happy to see that. As a matter of fact, I think that was like even a president or vice president or something of some country that was. So anyway, so those things are going on already. I think I think what we have to do here in Mount Bayou is I don't know, some kind of way elevate our thought and our position here. In order for us for those people to also see us as a way to establish trade in the United States, rather than, because I think they're making the same mistake, is that they may go to Savannah, Georgia, or all these other places, Charlotte, North Carolina, and places like that, and which is well and fine in some degrees, but that there needs to be thought of how to position some of these things here in Mount Bayou, and so that's the way I'd look at that. I know that maybe not the exact question that you asked me, but at least this is where my thought takes me.
And you need to follow the train of your thoughts. That is okay. I'm trying to see what the people are thinking about this possibility of us working together. Okay, a couple of days ago,
So that was one example. I put it that way. That's one example. Some people are thinking about things like that.
Perfectly fine. So a couple of days ago, I put out a video where I was saying that our miracle, or the miracle that can happen among us as people of African descent, is for us to work together. Because if we work together, there is no mountain that can stand in front of us, because we are enough to weather any type of storm.
Right.
But it happened that sometimes we find it difficult to work among ourselves. But anyway, that is part of the educational system anyway. That is part of the design. Because if we work together, then we can solve the problem. And somebody doesn't want us to solve the problem, because if we solve the problem, then we can take care of our needs. Then we can decide our fate in this world. And that is not necessarily the interest of some other persons. I understand that. But despite that, we still need to work towards achieving that, because that is where we start to live. Now we are just surviving. We want to live the way we really want to live. So when I say, what are people thinking? I mean, in this direction, how do we free ourselves from these shackles? You see, you said something really important, that people are still in the plantation. Yes, we are still in the plantation. You see, the people in the plantation are not only in the United States, but also in Africa, because the same plantation they created in the United States, they created also in Africa. So that as they imprison you guys there, they also imprison us here. So we're in the same boat. So we need to free ourselves, all of us, not one single one left. We must free ourselves, all of us. So that is where I want to ask you the last solution, or the last question actually, which is, what solution do you see in being able to address some of these challenges? You talked about, for example, economic power. I don't know even if you want to use the term like that, but you talk about empowering the people economically, working together, then of course looking at our history and all of that. So where do you see the actual solution coming?
Well, I think actually, when I answer the question, I can say this, say it this way. I can say what I think needs to happen, right? But how do I affect what I think needs to happen? I can say to you, well, all the African countries need to decide their own government and come together as one unified government for the whole, and maybe all the us, maybe something like similar like the United States. So all the countries become states, and and that will unify and make that whole continent a very powerful place. But that's outside of anything that I can do. I can just say that. And so if you ask me what is a solution to the problem, I think I'm better suited to say what I can do and what I think I can affect. And so what I can affect is what I'm doing here, because I'm just one person, and I think let me just say this, and I'm saying something that everybody knows. Africa has probably more resources than anywhere else in the world. And then you have a young population. You have the youngest population of any continent in the world. So it's an up and coming place. And I heard somebody a few years ago, I don't know where I saw it, maybe on a YouTube video or something, that there was this man there that had a solution. He was putting on a graph on how much education needed to happen in the continent and the number of people that were now at different ages and how they needed to be educated to a certain level so that they can aspire to be a global power education wise and be a global power and capture these young Africans. And I don't know who that was. I don't know if I had to go back and find it, but it seemed to me that this guy had a supernatural answer to a big problem. And I said, if this guy can implement this, you change the face of everything, on that continent. And now you're actually fulfilling what the Bible says, that the Bible says that now the rich become poor, the poor become rich. You can see that. I can see it happening in things like that. And I think for us to collaborate together as these things are going on, like the things that you're doing right now, this podcast is a tremendous help, because you're reaching across the pond and you're talking to me, and I'm sure you're talking to other African people around the planet, and you're establishing connections and looking for solutions. And I'm offering ours here in Mount Bayou because I'm here. And I think here in the United States, we should be the one looked at in the United States for helping in these solutions. So anyway, that's kind of the answer to what I need. Your question, I hope.
But that is great. That is great. I told you at the beginning that what comes out from your mind is the best, because we want to also allow our mind to be free to think and to just express what is coming out, and that is natural. You see, right now, what we are doing is that our organization is actually spread out in different parts of the world. We have collaborators in the US, in UK, in Nigeria, in Italy, where I am, in Canada, in the countries of Caribbean, because we are seeing ourselves as a people. We have challenges. We are also the solution to our problem. And that is how we are looking at it, that we can find solution to this problem. All right, so I want to thank you so much for the time that we have spent here. Maybe in few seconds or in half a minute, what will be your final thought here?
My final thought is for you. I want to encourage you to continue doing what you're doing. I think it's a tremendous. It's tremendous for you to broadcast and talk about to people around the world about the things that you're talking about and get these ideas out there. And hopefully your podcast really, really, really grows. And when we are offline, I want to send you some ideas that I have that you can reach more people, at least reach more people to talk to. Put it that way, because I just love what you're doing, and so I don't know how you found me, but I love that you reached out. So, and I think it's a good idea, and I would love people to understand what the value is of our own place. If our own place, meaning Mount Bayou, to me, Mount Bayou is a sacred city. It's when you come to Mount Bayou, you should take your shoes off because you're on holy ground. Because of what it represents here in this country. And I think we should see it that way. And I think we should utilize this place for us to reach out to the rest of us around the world, and collaborate with each other around the world, and so I wish everybody could see what I see. And I thank you for being persistent and and reaching out to me and continue and doing what you're doing. Again, I'm saying that again, I'm repeating myself, but thank you. I really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. You just don't know how much. And I don't want you to ever stop, but I want to see you expand your reach, because it's tremendous what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Mr. Hermon Johnson. It's been a pleasure here. Of course, I look forward to talking to you again, because here we don't stop. We don't do one. We continuously engage and continuously talk, because there is a lot to talk about. So thank you so much again for the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.